Good evening, everybody. We are about to launch into chapter 22 in our book on the second aorist, active and middle indicative. There is a very good exegetical insight that Mounce presents here. I'd like to read it together, and this helps, I think, with the concept of the aorist. Let me start, but I'll hand it off to somebody else. But the aorist, and he gives us in parentheses here where the word aorist comes from the Greek aoristos, is the indefinite tense that states only the fact of the action without specifying its duration. Now that word aoristos literally means the alpha in front is a negation, but horizo is the verb from which we get this root. And I'd like to show you what I found here in the lexicon for that word horizo. I found it earlier. There it is. No, it's orthizo. I had it just a minute ago. I'm sorry. There it is. All right. The first definition is setting a boundary. And that word boundary, I think, would help us in our understanding of the name of the tense and the idea of the tense. A boundary of time, for instance, to fix or appoint a time, that's to set a boundary of time, or of space, to fix or determine a place, for instance. Or a second definition, it could be of persons, to appoint or designate a person. That's a definition of horizo. Third definition is making a definite plan, appoint, decide, or determine. And I think that word determine is helpful along with setting a boundary. We get our English word horizon from this Greek word, which is the boundary between the sea and the sky. It determines a point. And so when you put the alpha in front of it, it's indeterminate. It doesn't have a boundary in time or space or anything like that. And so they talk about the aspect being indefinite. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It doesn't, it tells you only the fact that it happened without telling you any more about it as to the duration, the beginning, the ending, whether it's repetitive or anything like that. It's just.
It also, I think, then is establishing that not only does it not tell you, it isn't going to.
That's right, yeah. Because the author, in using the aorist, is not focusing attention on that part of the meaning. It's the idea of undefined aspect is kind of making it secondary into importance.
Yeah, so is it then drawing attention to something else by
Yes.
avoiding drawing attention to when?
Yes, I think so. I think that's often the case. You'd have to see it in context to be able to tell, but as we get into it, I think we will see that. Okay. Would somebody else like to read the rest of this exegetical insight?
When the aorist describes an action as a unit event, it may accentuate one of three possibilities, as imagine a ball that has been thrown, let fly, which would be the inceptive or ingressive, flew, constative or durative, and hit, culminative or telic. These aspects of the indefinite aorist may shed some light on a perplexing saying of Jesus in his Olivet Discourse. Mark 13:30 and parallels. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things
Genetai.
geneta.
Now that comes from genomai, which means to become, to be, or to happen, or something similar. Come to be. It's sometimes translated be, almost equivalent of me, but
Does that verb appear in the aorist in every one of the parallel references?
probably so. I haven't checked them, but
And I'm wondering, it being in the aorist, that would mean that there was a significant degree of misinterpretation of this during the 60s and 70s.
before the temple was destroyed.
No.
Oh, you're talking about the
I'm talking
20th.
about the 1960s and 70s when the 6-day war occurred.
Oh, yeah.
Israel recaptured Jerusalem. People
Yeah.
were thinking, okay, that's the sign that Jesus is going to come back again in the second coming. Before the people who were in Israel in 1948 die of old age.
Yeah, they were making.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's putting a very definite time frame
Mhm.
to what you're telling me is, or what it's
Well-
saying here is in the aorist, which above all things lacks a definite time frame.
Well, let's continue in the
Yeah,
exegetical
continue this.
because
Yeah.
he's saying something kind of different. But
Yeah.
The difficulty lies in the fact that Jesus has already described the end of the world in verses 24 and 25 in vivid terms of the sun and moon not giving their light, the stars falling from the sky, and the heavenly bodies being shaken. Unless the expression this generation
Genea haute.
is stretched to include the entire age from Jesus's first to his second coming, a less likely option, the aorist
Genetai.
Genetai must provide the clue. If we view the verb as an aggressive aorist and translate it from the perspective of initiated action, the saying may be rendered, I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things begin to come to pass. This nuance of the same aorist form may also be seen in the angel Gabriel's words to Zechariah in Luke 1:20. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day Genetai.
Yeah, these things happen, or these things come to be.
Not only the birth, but the adult ministry of John the Baptist is prophesied by Gabriel in verses 13 to 17. Yet Zechariah recovers his speech as soon as he writes the name of his infant son John on a tablet, verses 62 to 64. Accordingly, verse 20 should be translated, and now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day these things begin to happen. The student is well advised then to pay careful attention to the contextual meaning of the larger sense unit and interpret the aorist as the periscope or paragraph would suggest. Which then that brings me back to, that tells me that there were a lot of people that were drawing conclusions in the 60s and 70s about that earlier verse that aren't warranted by the way it's
so
grammatically written.
But let me say this, I want to hear what you have to say, David.
yeah.
The aorist tense is used, and you can't determine from the tense whether you should focus attention on the beginning, the
Right.
middle, or
Right.
the end of the
Right.
action.
It's not
But
telling
the
you.
context tells you that.
Right.
So you have to use the context.
There were lots of conclusions being drawn that
Mhm.
in the 60s and 70s saying, now this is going to represent the final conclusion of these events.
Yeah. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, you say that, but I'm not sure that. So I would have said that looking at this, that a reasonable translation could have been are happening. Until these things are coming to pass.
Okay, the
And
problem with that
yeah.
though, Dave, is that the aorist tense is not a continuous tense. You have the present tense and the imperfect tense, which are continuous action.
Well,
But the aorist
okay,
is not continuous.
but let me explain
Yeah,
my
okay.
reasoning. The tense in itself, as you have said, doesn't tell us
Right.
what part of this matters or
Mhm.
the whole thing completely. And in English, we use that tense that I just described for precisely
Are
that
happening.
purpose
Okay,
until these things are coming to pass. That's exactly what we use that tense for. And now you don't know what I meant by it. And so this generation will not pass away until these things begin to happen. I might read that to mean that generation completely passes away when the first of these things happens. But in that context, on an Olivet discourse, that would be actually even a little hard to describe. And in the case of Zechariah, we can look at it after the fact and say, well, yeah, as soon as he wrote his name out.
Yeah.
But actually, the beginning of them happening was that she was expecting a baby when she was infertile. That was the actual beginning of those things happening, not when he wrote the name out. And so to say when they begin to happen, well, what's the beginning? I mean, it happened sometime in those events.
well,
And so I'm saying actually a truer way to look at the concept of the entire set is to say are happening or are beginning
okay.
to come to pass,
Um,
are coming to pass.
I see your point, but the the aorist tense was used there not to focus attention on the precise time of the verb. You have to get the rest of that from the context.
But
with-
in English, that's how we do that. I mean, I'm just in English, if I don't know what the time when these things are happening, and I'm not telling you when, this stuff's happening.
Okay. Well, you would say happen then instead of are happening.
Well, no,
That's the English form of the
no, because it doesn't carry that concept, because that's why there's a difficulty in this translation. I tell you the truth, these things with him, Zechariah, and now you will be silent and I will speak until the day these things happen.
Yeah.
Well, which of the things? If that's really true, in that verb, it's probably okay just to have the verb because it didn't say which ones happened, but some people might say it means all of them happened. But if I say are happening and there's a description of stuff, it doesn't tell me.
Well,
and I know it's indefinite.
You could have used the present tense to say that.
But it's more definite that I'm not letting you know within that frame if I say are happening. Because I'm telling you, it's the whole set and your voice you will not regain your speech until these things are happening. Okay. Which one of them? I don't know. I'm not telling you. You'll find out.
All right. Well, let's leave it at that and go on to read the chapter.
I mean,
just for the fact that we have
is there an
English reference, no English verbal form that lacks that fails to have a precise reference to time? There's probably no way we can actually come up with a good translation.
Yeah, the English simple past does that.
So is that tense I used in English have an equivalent always translated that way Greek?
Does English have?
No, does Greek have an always translated are happening? I mean, is there a tense that always translates that?
Well, the present tense is capable of that, but you can't say that it's always translated that way. Sometimes it's translated as a simple present.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, we don't really use the tenses the same way. And I'm just looking at this and going, what's the simplest English thing I can say that actually says this is a set of stuff and there's a related thing happening in it, but there's no way for you to know when. And what you do by using begin says you know when, and I'm not convinced you do.
Yeah. Well, he can only say that if he applies the whole rest of the context.
And also past knowledge. He knows this. At the time the words were spoken to Zechariah didn't know when he'd gain his voice.
No.
And neither do we know, right? So there's this debate about when these things are done. And there's still the debate about what generation is he talking about? This generation. What did Jesus mean? Did he mean the people alive then, or did he mean the people who will be on the earth until the end times? What did he mean?
Well,
And-
that's what I think.
Well, but
you
you
have
see,
to
we have
get,
this,
you have to get the rest of Scripture involved too.
but we are now saying we know it means at the very, when these things begin to happen. Well, when did these things begin to happen? And which things? Because there's this whole debate about it. And I'm saying you're applying a certain understanding of the meanings of all those words in order to use the word begin. And I don't think the Greek conveys that exact meaning. And I'm saying
you can't use language and tense alone to convey all of that.
the Greek doesn't provide the word begin. And so you've looked at the context and said, well, it must be that word. But in the case of Zechariah, it didn't actually happen when that way. It wasn't begin, because the baby was, the angel spoke to him, your wife will conceive. Well, he could have regained his voice right then. As soon as she was pregnant and everybody knew, he could have regained his voice if it was begin.
Well, if these things refer to her pregnancy, but these things might refer to something else.
No, but the word, the prediction, wait a minute. The context of the scripture is a set of things that start with her pregnancy, right? And end with a ministry. And he regains his voice when he writes down his name is John, which is somewhere in the continuum of those events. So I'm just saying, I'm not agreeing with
these
with
things
this.
could have referred to what the angel said about John, not Elizabeth. He said he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and he will restore the hearts of the fathers to the sons. That's talking about his ministry, and that's what these things might be referring to.
They might.
Yeah, you'd have to. There's a limitation.
But that's my complaint.
Yeah.
That is exactly and precisely my complaint with putting something like that there that narrows it in the English to a precise point of time when the Greek did not do so.
Right.
That's my complaint.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's a valid point, Dave.
Okay.
But there are times when you can collate enough scripture together to come up with more precision in meaning.
But if I'm translating the Greek, my job is not to do that. It's to try to
Yeah.
leave any
Yeah.
ambiguity
You
in the
are
language
right.
there,
Yeah,
I think.
you are right. I agree with that.
I think that's the job of an interpreter.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But the point remains that the aorist tense is an undefined aspect.
I hear that.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm saying is that English are happening is very much, when you say undefined, this is the problem. You would call that continuous. And I'm like, well, okay, but the way that you describe this, it is so, how can we normally translate it into these words are being used in ways that are not honestly very consistent. And that's part of what's really difficult for me with all this discussion about the Greek, is that it's not consistent in the way we use English, because depending on the English sentence, I might take simple past tense or simple present tense to, yes, it's not defined, but neither is these things are happening. I didn't, if I have the context now in the English is, if I describe something that takes 5 minutes, right? Or something that takes 100 minutes, what I have said is that I'm in the middle of a set of things. I'm somewhere in that continuation of a set of things. That's the logical concept of what the English is. And his description of how aorist is being used says that there's some stuff that's happening, and we don't know how long it takes. And most of the time, we don't care about any of that. But there are these cases clearly where we need to be careful not to be indicating that the whole set of things has already happened.
Okay.
Right? That's what he's complaining. He's saying we want to be careful that when we translate the English, we didn't do it in such a way as to say all that stuff has already happened.
We don't want to exclude viable possibilities.
Yeah, we don't want to exclude possibilities of it happening during those events.
Okay. That's
And
fair
I
enough.
think that's
Yeah.
the thing that he's really warning us.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking begin is too narrow a statement
It is. It is
to
narrow.
make that English careful, right? That's really.
Okay. You did say something I think is important, not to let our translation become an interpretation.
Yeah.
If there are ambiguities in the language, leave them there when you translate.
And I look, I appreciate this. Thank you, Carl, for this discussion. I want you to know, I mean, I read the things and I enjoy what I read. Sometimes I come up with something in the Bible. These translations are great. I think, I think the translations we have are fantastic. And sometimes I come across words and go, oh, yeah, I don't think that's how I would translate that word because I think that's misunderstood now in the English. Or it raises a question. But as you know, I'm not really trying to say the translators did a bad job.
No. But when you find,
When you talk about ambiguities too, I mean, as I understand this, if I'm getting it right, the whole function, purpose of aorist is to leave the reference to time ambiguous.
think you're
And
right.
that's what I was saying is that in our English verb form, we don't have a verb in form that leaves the time reference ambiguous.
Well, I kind of think we do. To say that, for instance, a lot of times in narrative, the aorist is used to, he said, is an example where the aorist is used very often. It doesn't tell you when he said it necessarily, or whether it's a long discourse or just a short answer, anything like that.
So in
Is
that
it like-
particular case, you can
Sure.
tell that has to have been an action that's completed.
Yeah.
Because it could not be reported.
came out of his mouth.
Unless it had been completed.
Yeah, yeah. But there are other verbs, not just
Which
speaking
makes it
verbs.
past tense.
Yeah, past, the
But is it
simple past tense.
Sometimes aorist is not past tense.
That's right. He's going to say that.
Yeah, he's going to get to that, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it really bizarre to us. It's almost like he's
Yeah.
really saying this stuff did happen sometime, might have happened, not
Yeah.
Or
might.
it could happen.
Well, maybe not the might or coulds, but happened or did happen or will be happening, might be happening now,
Well, let's read it.
Yeah. it's
He'll,
tough.
he'll
right?
say that.
Yeah.
One thing I'm going to remind us about is the terms that he uses. I really don't like using them. Perfective versus imperfective. This is something he adopted only in the fourth
Yeah.
edition of his book. Prior to that, he used the terms continuous versus undefined. And that's what I would like to try to be consistent about. So I scratched out wherever he uses perfective and call it undefined. Wherever he uses the term imperfective,
That's great.
I'll say continuous, if
Yeah,
I can remember to do it.
we're going to get that. So
Yeah. Okay, in this chapter, you'll see overview. You'll learn that the aorist indicates an undefined, and I'm not going to use the word perfective, action, usually occurring in the past. And that usually, I would say above 98% of the time, does occur in the past. I've been translating the Gospel of John, and I don't recall an aorist that talks about anything other than the past time. For now, it should be translated with the simple past tense in English. I ate, not I was eating. See, I ate is undefined aspect. I was eating is continuous aspect in past time. In other words, the imperfect tense. Greek has two ways to form the aorist. The second aorist uses the unmodified verbal root for its aorist tense stem, which will always be different from the present tense stem. An example is the word balo. The present stem has two lambdas.
Mm-hmm.
The root, which is used in the aorist tense, has only one lambda. That's a very slight variation, but there are others that are quite a bit different.
This is similar to the imperfect. I
Uh,
mean, we
no,
had
the
that
im-
discussion with the imperfect.
The imperfect is always based on the present
I'm
tense.
sorry, we had that discussion with the future tense, right? About
Yes, we
about the
did.
root difference.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Third bullet point, the second aorist is formed using an augment, just like the imperfect tense did. And Ray, I don't think you were with us when we talked about the imperfect tense.
No.
So it would be good for you to, I think I have a copy of my work on the chapter 21, which, wait a minute, no, the review between chapter, before chapter 21.
Did you get a copy of that?
Here's a copy of it for you, Ray.
I did post that.
Okay, and then the work that I did on the imperfect tense, we'll talk about the augment. But just very briefly, for your sake, Ray, the augment was something that's used for tenses that describe past time. It's similar in a way to our ed in English.
Okay.
When you put an ed on the end of a verb, it makes it past time. That's not the only way you form the past time, because some irregular English verbs do it differently. But for
Like
them,
saw.
yeah, see versus saw. Yeah,
Go win.
yeah. There are a lot of irregular, and I made a list, 3 pages of the English irregular verbs. But the augment, the way the Greek does it, they put an augment in front of the verb. If the verb begins with a consonant, they put an epsilon, and that's the augment that tells you it's past time. An augment occurs on the imperfect tense, which is example of that. I was going. The past tense in English was I went. The present tense, I go, or I am going. But the continuous past tense in English is I was going. In Greek, the continuous past time is the imperfect tense, and it's built on the same root as the present tense stem. Okay, he'll talk more about augments in this chapter too. 22.1. The past tense of an English verb is formed in one of 2 ways. A regular verb, footnote 1, also called a weak verb, forms its past by adding ed. I study all the time is present. I studied all last night. It's past. That's a regular verb. An irregular verb, footnote 2, a strong verb, forms its past tense by altering its actual stem. Usually the vowel is changed. I swim every morning. I swam last night as well. As far as the meaning of the verb is concerned, it makes no difference which pattern is followed. Swimmed and swam would have the same meaning if the former were a real word. Greek 22.2. The meaning. In the last chapter, you studied one of the past tenses in Greek. The imperfect tense describes an, change the word to continuous action in past time.
Yeah. So he is saying that an imperfect tense is an imperfective act, imperfect
Yeah.
is an
The imperfect tense is
imperfective action.
imperfective action.
And otherwise it's perfective. I mean, it seems consistent, and
Yeah.
it's just that it's hard to remember what it means. Is that?
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the imperfect tense, and the imperfect tense describes an imperfective action.
Yes.
Makes sense, I think.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Now, if you think of perfect as complete
Right,
rather than flawless,
perhaps.
that
Yeah.
might help. But I'd prefer that we together use the term continuous versus undefined.
Yeah. Okay.
It usually occurs in the past. It's a little troubling because there are very few instances where it describes an action that's not in the past. The second past tense in Greek is the aorist. The aorist tense describes an undefined action that normally occurs in the past. Normally. Footnote 3. The word aorist means undefined or indefinite, and we talked about that. 22.3 translation. As the imperfect tense is always continuous, the aorist is always undefined. Now, when he makes a statement as bold as that, to say always, I think you ought to pay attention.
Oh, where's that now?
As the imperfect tense is always continuous, the aorist is always undefined.
Right, but in this, so I'm just putting a head around what this is talking about. In this exegetical insight, the aorist is the indefinite tense that states only the fact of the action
Yes.
without specifying its duration. When the aorist describes an action as a unit event, which is defined, right? You're saying is, you would say completed. But the thing that I'm thinking about with this is that's not how English sees things, and typically. And so the struggle with English simple past means it's completed.
Yeah.
But aorist doesn't mean it's completed so much as it's describing the thing as an entire unit. It doesn't mean that it's actually has all happened. It just means that it's a unit.
Yeah.
And
it may be continuing.
Yeah, and so
it's not telling you that.
It doesn't really work.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time using the English simple past is going to be fine, but we have to be aware that it may not really actually be a completed action in the time reference
Okay.
of the statement.
I think I understand your concept.
But it's requiring that it's talking about the entirety of it. But there may be a point of reference relative to the rest of the verbiage around it, which is inside of it in some fashion.
Yeah. I think
unlike the English.
Yeah.
Right. That I'm just trying to get a handle on what this is really saying, because
I think we all are.
And that's the best way I can think about describing. We don't have an English tense for that. That takes a lot of work in English.
But
that's the point I was trying to make. So nothing exactly matches this.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there is another tense which we'll get to 2 chapters from now, called the perfect tense. Perfect means completed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the perfect tense in Greek has a dual aspect.
Okay.
We'll get to that, but
yeah, all right.
It means an action that was completed in past time. That's where the completed idea comes from. Perfected.
So that would be equivalent of our English past perfect.
Yes.
But
that's what it sounds like.
Unlike English, it has the additional aspect of continuing in the present time. It's action that was completed in the past, but its effects are felt or
lingering effect. It should
lingering
be present.
effects. Yeah. An example of that is the verb saved. That's the perfect tense of the verb saved.
Yeah,
I was saved.
but I can think of a really good example, I think, where
Wow.
you would use something like that, might be like, if you were describing the bridge that fell yesterday,
Mhm.
the bridge fell, okay, that
And
was
it's
an
still down there.
instantaneous action,
Yeah.
but it still remains blocking the river and
Yeah.
it's still,
Good example.
Well, yeah, the way you use saved, I'm not sure what you mean.
The effects of being saved continue
I'm
to the
still
present
saved.
time, still
Yes,
saved.
I'm
Yeah.
still saved.
And it goes
Well-
on into the future indefinitely.
But that's not so much a function of the tense as it is of the nature of the verb and its logical consequences.
Well, they're both included. All verbs have.
I'm look, some things are a natural, logical consequence of the statement. There's no other way to say I was saved and not have it have a consequence after the action. But the bank was robbed. I mean, I could make the argument about every single thing. I mean, so the past perfect, I'm sorry, what's the past perfect tense in English? The bank,
I have gone.
I did rob the bank.
No, I have robbed.
I have robbed the bank. Okay. That's bringing into the current present.
That's present perfect.
Yeah. What?
Past perfect is I had robbed the
I
bank.
had robbed the bank before the police caught me.
Yeah.
I had robbed the bank. So what's the example of I had been saved? Is that what?
Well, that would be called pluperfect in
No.
Greek.
Well, no. So I'm trying to get what you're saying, that this has a dual purpose of continuing into the present.
Well-
And you use the example of saved.
Yeah, I don't want to
Okay.
focus on the perfect tense yet. That's 2 chapters in the future.
All right.
But there are other tenses besides the aorist
All right.
and imperfect. Okay. I started 22.3. As the imperfect tense is always continuous, the aorist is always undefined. It tells you that the action happened, but nothing more about the aspect of the action. This means you will normally translate the aorist with the simple form of the English past tense. I studied, not I was studying. Here's an example. Kai eothon, and they came, proston ioanane, came to John. So they came. That's an action that happened. Maybe it took a long time for him to come.
We don't know.
Maybe not. You
Mhm.
don't know.
Something that happened. We don't know.
Yeah. The wise men, they came to Jerusalem. Doesn't tell you that they've been traveling for 8 months.
Yeah. Some assume it was 2 years because that's the you
Yeah.
know,
But the point is, you
we don't
you
actually
can't
know that.
tell.
right.
But they arrived there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
2 formations. Greek has 2 different ways of forming the aorist tense, somewhat as English has 2 ways of forming the past tense. The Greek tense parallel to the English regular formation, like study and studied, that's a
Mhm.
regular English verb, is called the first aorist. That'll be done in chapter 23. The Greek tense parallel to the English irregular, like see and saw, formation is called the second aorist. I will start with the second aorist because it is almost identical to the imperfect. That's his reasoning for going back, doing second first. A Greek verb will either be first or second aorist, not both. For example, in Greek, swim would become swam or swimmed, but not both. I think he meant to say in English.
Yeah. Okay.
Footnote 5. There are a few exceptions to this rule, but only a few.
Does that mean that there's
Yeah.
some Greek
Well,
verbs that use both
Yeah,
forms?
there's a second aorist form as well as a first aorist
Yeah.
form of the same verb, but I don't think we'll encounter it in this first year
So
grammar.
that would be as if people just started saying, I swimmed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and some might, and then we'll have both forms, won't we?
Mhm. Well, we had a family that lived near us, and their kids and ours grew up together, and I remember little Emily used to talk like that. I
Yes.
swimmed.
Yes, children will do these things, and hopefully they learn. Maybe we'll just fix our language.
Okay. Somebody else want to read for a little bit?
Sure, I can do that. Okay, second aorist active, 22.5 overview chart. Second aorist active indicative. Augment plus aorist active tense stem plus connecting vowel, omicron or epsilon, plus secondary active personal ending. The example is eta plus lab plus omicron plus mev. That is
Men.
I'm sorry, men. What's wrong with me? Men is
The labamen.
a labamen.
The augment there, Ray, since this is a little new to you, is the epsilon.
Yeah, that's what I was figuring had to be the augment.
Yes, and the augment is always an epsilon if the verb stem or the tense stem begins with a consonant.
Okay.
But if it begins with a vowel, then you have a different type of augment. It's called a it's called a goodness, the term escaped. Well,
It lengthens though. Yeah.
it lengthens. It changes either from to well, he had a good discussion of that in chapter 21. I think it might be useful to go back to that for array's sake, but also
Yeah,
to
that's
remind us. Okay,
He's
2110.
Yeah.
Okay, page 228, Ray. David, you want to read that?
Sure. Augment. The augment indicates past time. There are two different ways a word will augment, depending upon whether the stem of the verb begins with a consonant or a vowel. If the verb begins with a consonant, the augment is eta, always with smooth breathing. For example, luo, and is augmented as eluo.
Eluon, yeah.
I'm sorry, eluon. I'm sorry.
By the way, that's an epsilon, not an eta.
I'm sorry, epsilon. Please
Yeah.
forgive me. I'm sorry. B, if a word begins with a single vowel, the augment is formed by lengthening that vowel. For example,
read the footnote.
okay, the footnote says this is called temporal augment because it takes longer to say the word with the long vowel. Okay, I'm wondering who's got that kind of stopwatch out. The other one, agapao, is augmented as agapone.
Mm-hmm.
The lengthening follows the standard pattern learned with contract verbs, except that an additional alpha lengthens to eta, not alpha.
Okay, so here's, if the original vowel was alpha, the one on the right, then it lengthens to an eta when it becomes an augment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or if it's originally an epsilon, like erkamai, then it lengthens to an eta. So both alpha and epsilon lengthen to an eta. If the original were an omicron, it would lengthen to an omega. I think horao is an example of that.
So, and then iota, upsilon, and omega remain the same.
Well,
Oh,
they look
really?
like it,
What
but
does that say?
remember those, the iota, even though it doesn't look, a long iota and a short iota look identical.
Yes,
A long upsilon and a
okay.
short upsilon look identical. Omega is always long, so.
How do we
there's-
say those I mean, I'm not.
Well, remember the word intrigue? He made a point of this when he was talking about pronunciation. In English, the short I is I, like in intrigue. In English, it's eg, the second I. And that's the same way in Greek. We have words that have the two different qualities of sound.
All right,
As far as upsilon go, I don't think there's a difference in pronunciation.
okay.
And alpha can be either long or short
And
too.
when we're looking these up and we see something that starts with these letters, so in some cases, the augment seems not to even be there if it's beginning with those three letters, right?
Iota, upsilon, or
Or
omega.
omega?
Yeah,
It means that we don't even see it because it'll look like the lexical form.
I think that's true.
I don't know if we've come across any like that.
Not yet. We will perhaps.
So that means that,
The ones
That's-
on the left are the ones that we'll most likely encounter.
right. So I'm just wondering if that may be because I have trouble telling from the form which tense it is. I don't think we've gotten there yet, but I don't know that it'll be confusing anyway.
As we
because-
do the exercises,
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
be
find out.
working on that.
But if we have these others and we see that letter, we have to be aware it might have been one of these other letters.
Yeah.
When we try to find the lexical form, right? That's what it's
Yeah.
doing.
And then the diphthongs do similar things.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The iota will subscript in case of the alpha iota, epsilon iota, or omicron.
Yeah, that's
iota.
on the next page there. It
Yeah.
talks about the diphthongs.
Yeah. So just as we do the exercises, Ray, we'll have practice with these augments, but the same augment that the imperfect tense uses will be used in the aorist tense. I mean, the same concepts of augments. It occurs at the beginning of the word. So back to chapter 22.
So footnote 5, I think 241. That's where we are, right?
Yes. Okay, you read the gray section.
Footnote 7. No, I don't know.
I don't think you read under the line.
Oh, all right, fair enough. Luo has a first aorist active form. So the paradigm in this chapter uses the second aorist of the verb
Lambano.
labano.
Yeah. And the
which
root is
lob,
lob.
which means I take.
Yeah.
Notice that the endings are identical to those used in the imperfect. Okay, and we have alaben, un, tus,
Yeah.
artus,
Artus.
artus, Jesus,
Mhm.
which is Jesus then took the bread.
Okay, see that word elaben, which he underlined.
Right.
That's the aorist verb. The epsilon is the augment. Lob is the verbal root. And N is the third person singular ending. You could break it down into epsilon being the connecting vowel and nu is the true ending. Does that make sense? So he's giving us an example. He's not using luo because that doesn't have a different root.
Yeah.
And he's got color coding here to show the augment separate from the root, separate from the ending. And one thing to notice in the second aorist, just like it was in the imperfect, is that with these secondary endings, the first person singular and the third person plural are identical to each other.
Yes.
So you can't tell whether it's I took or they took, except by the context. If you have a plural subject, that'll tell you it's third person plural verb.
So if it could be the verb doesn't specify the subject, and we're going to have to figure out what
That's
it's
right,
supposed to
from
be.
the context.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Yeah.
Continue reading.
Okay. 22.6 paradigm, second aorist active indicative.
Well, let's read this together vertically.
Okay, thank you.
First singular. Notice where the accent is too. It
Okay.
will shift in the first plural because the accent can't go farther back than the third to the last. But all the others have it accented on.
Okay.
Oh no, a second plural, same way. The others accent the first one. Elabon,
Elabon,
Elabes,
Elabes, Elaben,
Elaban,
Elab,
no, Elaban,
Elaban.
excuse me. And then Elabaman,
Elabaman,
Elabata,
Elaban.
Elaban.
Okay.
So those first plural and second plural are 4-syllable words. The others are 3. And the meanings
Okay.
are pretty.
Yeah, that's
No.
fine. We have the meanings. I took, you took,
Mhm.
he, she, it took, we took, you took, they took.
Yeah.
All right. 22.7, augment. Augmentation for the aorist follows the same rules as it did for the imperfect. 22.8, tense form. The aorist active tense form is listed as the third form of the verb in the lexicon, e.g., elabon.
Yeah. Now let me talk through this here for a
Okay.
minute. You might remember from past chapters, he introduced it a couple of chapters ago. The first one listed is the present active indicative first person singular. That's the lexical form where you'll find it in the lexicon. Lambano in this case. It doesn't have lob as the root, as a present tense stem. It has a mu in there inserted between the alpha and the beta. But all the rest of the, and the one in parentheses is based on the present tense stem, but that is the imperfect.
Right.
And he puts it in parentheses. It's not a separate tense. It's connected with the present tense.
Lambano.
Lambanon.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Lambanon.
Yeah, right.
See, it has the augment, then it has the same 4 letters, lamb, as the present, and then connecting vowel alpha. No, lamban is the root.
Hmm?
Yeah, the root for lambano is lamban. You take off the omega. So they added not only the mu between alpha and beta, but they added an alpha nu after the beta. But the way you get that present tense stem is to take off the omega from the lexical form.
So the future in this is yet a different root.
Yeah.
This one's very regular.
Yeah, very regular.
Some of them will have the same root for future and aorist.
But this has lempsomai. If you look back in a couple of chapters at future tense, it'll show you what that root is.
Yeah. And it's even different. The other tenses we haven't learned yet are still yet different.
Yeah. And the one underlined is the second aorist,
right,
which we're talking about.
Right.
Elabon. He just introduced that in its paradigm. So lob is the root for the aorist. Lamps is the root for the future. Well, I think it's actually lame, but the sigma added to the beta becomes a psi. I'll show you where we can look in the lexicon in the back, or the appendix in the back has a list of verbs that are used 50 times or more. And we can look for Lombano there, and he has explanations about all of them. There it is. Top of page 457. Lombano. Footnote 1. Lob is the root. Actually, the same root is used to form all the tense stems. Okay. He says that, but they look a lot different. We will give explanations for the different tense stems, and they are quite straightforward, but you may want to memorize the different forms. Key to the remember with these different tenses is that the root lob and all these letters, 3 letters, are always present in some form. The alpha undergoes a blout, and the beta is changed by the letter that follows it, but the 3 letters are always present. A mu is inserted in the present, future, and aorist passive forms.
Which are you? You're on page 457?
457, the footnote 1 on present tense. And then footnote 2 describes the future. The root is still lob, he says, but the alpha lengthens to eta.
Okay.
A mu is inserted, lame, and the beta joins with the sigma of the tense formative for the future sigma to form a psi. So beta plus sigma becomes a psi. It's a future middle deponent. So
practically speaking, I mean, this is like, there's English verbs like this too, that probably there's probably, if you studied it, you could describe how these things happened.
yeah,
But none of us who speak the language know any of that.
right,
We just know what the words are.
right.
And I'm just wondering, it seems like
this is
practically,
one-
Carl, you just know it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
This is a very common verb. We'll run across it all the time, and this is one we ought to memorize.
Thank you. Well, if I can, but yes.
Let's wait for Ray.
Okay, let's see. I can pause.
Is there a pause? Okay. Okay, you want to continue reading, David?
Sure, I'll be doing that. Remind me where we are.
Tense form 22.8. Oh, we started with, yeah. Okay, let me.
You were talking about
Yeah,
this.
I think I finished. But there are 6 tense forms, and they're listed in the lexicon, the back of the book, in the same order. The first one is lombano, that's present tense. The second one in parentheses is the imperfect. It's not a separate tense because it's based on the present tense stem. He just gives it to us as a help. And in his lexicon, or
So
in the back of the book, you will find some verbs that don't have a form in parentheses. That means that they don't occur in the New Testament in the imperfect tense.
Okay.
this is beginning
Not
to
that they don't
make
exist
sense.
in our language, just not.
Right.
So
not
this imperfect tense is a form that's derived from the aorist and present, because
Not
it's
the
using,
aorist, because
Yeah,
it might use just from the present.
but it's using the endings of the aorist, because it's not using the present tense aorist.
No, it's using
it's
the
used-
secondary tense endings, the same as the
second aorist.
yeah, the same as a second aorist, but it will use a different root.
Yes, it's using the root from the present tense. No?
Well, the imperfect uses a present tense stem,
Stem.
not the verbal root.
Yes, that's what I meant. The present tense stem, but its endings are the same as the second aorist.
Yeah, that's right, because they're secondary tense and secondary endings. The first aorist will use primary endings.
Which are something we haven't learned yet.
Next chapter. The third,
Okay.
excuse me, the second word, lempsomai, that's future. The third one is aorist. The fourth one will be perfect. The fifth one will be, I have trouble remembering the fifth and the
So
sixth
are
one.
there any verbs that actually have both an imperfect and a second aorist?
Yes, this one here.
Okay, which one?
Oh,
this one does, yes.
Elambanon
Oh, yeah, it does.
and Elaban.
But would you ever have a first aorist and imperfect?
I think so. Yeah. We'll have to.
Okay, okay.
We'll
All right,
find
all
them.
right, all right. Oh, weird.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, you want to read after that?
Something weird. Okay. In the active voice, a second aorist will always have a different tense stem from the present because the root will always have been modified to form the present tense stem.
So
Otherwise,
that answers your
yes.
question, I think, because the aorist and the imperfect, even though they have the same
Yeah.
secondary endings, they have a
they
different
have
root,
different stems. Yeah, right.
stem and root.
Yeah, well, there's this relationship that's so that past you have the augment and you have the same secondary endings on the
Yes.
imperfect and the second aorist.
Yes, but the root will be different.
Yeah. All right. Otherwise, you could never distinguish an imperfect from a second aorist. Well, that's nice. Okay. This sometimes involves a drastic change, such as when the verb uses different roots to form its tenses, such as Lego and leg becomes apon, right? Yeah, we did that. And the aorist is uip.
This is
It's just structurally like one of our really irregular.
that's right.
Uip?
Yes.
How do you say? Is that how you say
Well,
it? Uip?
it's yeah. This
Uip?
is a oh, what is he called? He'll tell us that. It's a letter that fell out of use before the time of Koine Greek, but its effects, because it was there, are still felt in.
Okay.
It's a consonantal iota.
Okay, but we still say.
Wait a minute. No, that's
No?
a digamma. They changed the older lexicons used a different form of that, but he'll explain it later
Okay.
on.
But most of the time, the changes between the present tense stem and the aorist active tense stem are minor. For example, the single consonant in a root like bal may have been doubled in the present balo. I didn't say it's balo, but have stayed single in the aorist balan. I'm sorry, ebalan. Or the stem vowel may have changed, like lep, which goes to lepo in the present, but elipon in the aorist. Memorize exactly, because these changes often involve only one letter. It is important to memorize the verbal root in lexical form exactly. Ebalon, imperfect, and ebalon, second aorist, are distinguishable by only a single letter. Translation hint: when you translate an inflected verbal form, ask yourself, am I looking at the present tense stem or not? If it is the present tense stem, then you may be looking at a present or imperfect. If the stem is different, you may be looking at a second aorist. For example, if you see
elipon.
you know this cannot be a present or imperfect because the present tense stem is late with an epsilon.
Mhm.
22.9, tense formative. The second aorist active has no tense formative. 22.10. Connecting vowels. The second aorist active uses the same connecting vowels as the present. I'm thinking about the tense formative, and that was for the future, right?
Yeah, sigma
And-
is the tense formative for the future, but for the liquid futures, it was epsilon sigma.
Right.
And the
Okay.
epsilon would drop out.
And I think Ray was here for that, or what were you, Ray? Do you remember that? Those,
The future tense where we had liquid futures
Yeah.
that used a different tense formative, epsilon sigma.
okay.
And we'll have other tenses that have, well, for instance, the first aorist, which is chapter 23, has a tense formative of sigma alpha. And there will be other tense formatives as well.
Okay. Oh, right. 22.11, personal endings. Because the second aorist is an augmented tense, it uses secondary personal endings.
And do you
I'm-
remember that chart we had?
I'm sorry, that statement is odd because other things are augmented and don't use the secondary endings. So I'm, really?
No,
No?
I-
Maybe that,
I can't.
I do
well-
not know. Maybe that is true. I hadn't noticed that. I'm looking at all these different, at this indicative chart here.
Well,
Is this
here's
true?
something helpful in the book on page 230.
Well, perfect uses those endings, but it's not augmented.
Well, let's wait till we
Okay,
get
that's
to
fine.
perfect then.
That's fine. Okay.
Go back in the book to chapter 21, page 230. He's got this chart. You with me, Dave?
No, but wait a minute. I'm confused. But I think what's bothering me is what we just said a minute ago about first aorist and second aorist. And you said that first aorist uses primary endings. Didn't
We
you
haven't got
just-
this.
But he
first
just
aorist
said
yet.
second aorist is augmented tense. Because it's an augmented tense, it uses secondary personal endings.
Well,
But I'm just looking, the aorist is also augmented. First aorist is augmented and it doesn't use those, or does it? I'm
think
really
it does.
feeling confused. So it's not true then that first aorist doesn't use, it also uses secondary endings.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I think those two things go together. If it has an augment, it will use secondary endings.
And looking at first aorist, it also has a formative.
Yeah, it has a
Okay.
transformative word.
All right. I'm sorry.
aorist
I'll keep
doesn't.
going. Okay, that just surprised me because I
Okay.
thought I'd heard something different.
Turn back, please, to page 230 in the book. You have a list in these four quadrants of primary tenses versus secondary tenses, and then in the
Okay.
active voice and the passive, middle/passive voice. This is a very helpful thing to memorize.
Okay.
Just pointing it out to you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure it helps me a lot because it doesn't follow the master
Which
chart.
doesn't?
Well, not for everything. So like I'm looking at first aorist and I don't see a new on the ending and so it looks like it would be a primary ending and I'm sort of confused. What's going on? So
that's the only exception.
and I'm looking at
and there's a reason it doesn't. And he'll explain it when we get to first aorist.
So, but I'm looking now at this chart in first aorist, the first three persons follow the primary endings, don't they? No, they don't.
The only exception is this doesn't have the new at the end in first aorist, where the second aorist does. But all the rest of the endings, the ones in red, are identical between this and that. So this is first aorist, it's second aorist.
Well, I'm looking at it's a primary. I'm sorry. Well, all right, all right, all right, all right.
Okay.
Okay.
We're
I'm
getting
not sure
close
how
to
that.
the end.
Okay, we're almost done.
Yeah.
Oh, that's-
Personal endings, I think.
Because the second aorist is an augmented tense, it uses secondary personal endings. In the active, the endings are identical to the imperfect active endings you have already learned. It will be easy to confuse these two tenses. The only difference between the imperfect and second aorist active is the tense stem. Gotcha. All right. Although the first person singular and third person plural are identical in form, context usually clarifies which one is intended. 22.12, verb vocabulary listing. In the appendix, pages 450 through 60, I have listed all the verbs occurring 50 times or more that have second aorists. It may be helpful to make a separate vocabulary card for each aorist. Actually, it's a verb, even if they don't have second aorist, it's all the verbs, right?
Yes, it is. That occur 50 times
That's
or
right,
more.
yeah. 22.13, irregular second aorists. What I said about irregular future forms applies to the aorist as well. Some aorist forms may appear to be irregular, but they actually are not. As you are memorizing your vocabulary and find difficult second aorist forms, you should decide whether you will recognize the second aorist based on the verbal root or whether you should just memorize the aorist form.
And I think I gave you a copy of the appendix from my book, second edition, which
You
had
did.
under the underlined words, which he suggests memorizing.
Yeah, I think so. All right.
Okay, then the middle,
Second
I
aorist.
don't think we need to read that. You can just study it on your own when you need to. He uses a different verb, though, as an example.
Yeah.
He doesn't use lambano, he uses ginomai.
I'm not sure why he did that, but that's all right, I guess.
Probably because, well, I don't want to guess on that.
All right.
So this is also a very common verb.
Yep.
Egenomen. That's
Egeneto.
this is a deponent verb. It doesn't have an active form. It means I become, I came to be, I happened. Some King James, I think, says it came to pass. Sometimes it's translated as I am, or like
he uses
Amy.
I became, you became, he, she became. So he's yeah. All right.
It usually has the idea of something in a state of change.
Is this the verb before Moses was? Actually, is that this
No,
verb?
that's Amy.
There's one of them where it's
Amy.
actually not me.
Really? Okay.
And I thought it was that
John
one.
8:58, is that what you're talking about?
Maybe.
Where before Abraham was, I am.
Before Abraham, and I think maybe that actually wasn't Amy. It may have been this verb. Oh yes, that was, but I'm talking about before Abraham was. I think was actually this.
Well, let's look. It's John 8:58.
I had looked it up once, and
Oh, you're right.
Oh, I remembered that. I looked it
Yeah,
up and thought, how interesting.
genestai.
Yeah, I looked that up. I don't know why.
Okay, that's an infinitive.
And it's this verb
Before Abraham came to
came to
came to
be.
be.
Yeah. And I thought, well, we should, I just would like to have been translated that way. I think it's actually quite,
It's a good translation.
quite simple.
Yeah,
it's very straightforward. Before Abraham came to be.
yeah.
It said before Abraham was. I mean, it means the same things, but I like it, you know.
Yeah, I do too. And I didn't notice that before.
Because he could have used
Yeah, he
the
could
to
have
be
used
verb, but he didn't.
ain, which is the imperfect form of ami.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember in Anarche ain ha logos, in the beginning was the word. That's the imperfect of ami. Yeah, but he didn't use it here.
Well, in before Abraham was, in the English puts a lifespan on Abraham, but Abraham's not dead.
Right. He
And
had a
Jesus-
beginning, but no end.
That's right, because he's in heaven.
Yeah.
And he's really careful in that.
Yeah, Jesus made a point of that.
That's right. He's a God of the living, not the dead.
That's right. Yeah.
When he's answering the Sadducees about the marriage.
But this
Right?
verse, yeah,
Because
That's
if you're
right.
using born, essentially, I mean, if you're using was, you're essentially saying before Abraham was born.
yeah,
You could, some have translated it that way, but he says before Abraham became, before
Yeah.
he became, before he began.
which means
Yeah.
there was a
Before he
point
came to
in,
be.
there was a point in time where he had not yet come to be.
Yeah,
So there's a beginning point for every soul,
that's right.
but no ending point.
That's right. And it's very precise how he said
Mhm.
it. It's, I just thought it was when I don't remember when I was probably during one of the messages that Rod's been preaching.
Yeah.
And I'll look at certain things and, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm in my interlinear because that one was curious to me and I was wondering. And
Well, there it is. Genestai. Now, we haven't studied in infinitives yet, but
yeah,
that's
that's fine.
that's
Okay, sorry to
important point.
distract.
Read that on 2216, please.
Yes, middle. In the third form of a verb in the lexicon, I'm sorry, if the third form of the verb in the lexicon ends with the amen, you know it does not occur as an aorist active and is middle only or deponent form. So in this case, it's egonomane. Egonomane. Egonomane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
egonomane.
ginomai, the present tense, is also deponent or middle only. And the
Yeah, we see that.
imperfect is also
It's all the way,
deponent,
all things deponent.
egonomane. And the future is also deponent.
Yep.
Genesomai, the omai ending, and the aorist, second aorist, is also
so it's deponent all the way
deponent,
across.
yeah. But the last, well, the perfect, which is the fourth one, that's not deponent.
That,
but
the
gegonomai, that's
that seems to be deponent. Oh,
yeah, that is deponent. And the last one, that's passive deponent, I think. So
Okay.
it's deponent in almost all tenses.
And 22.17, in the aorist, as in the future, the middle and passive are distinctly different forms. The aorist passive tense form is the last one listed. Egonathing.
Yeah.
Egonathing.
I think that's enough to read for tonight. The summary, you can just repeats what we've already learned. And then he's got the master indicative verb chart, which is adding to what we had previously, and then the vocabulary. But you'll do that on your own as you do the exercises. And then he's got previous words that he's adding to our information about them. And then there are two paradigms that he presents, 22.19 and 20, which you'll need to know for the exercises. So just realize they're there. And then he's got some advanced information. We'll save that for the next time, I guess. As you learn the vocabulary, take note of the verbal roots, which he indicates with an asterisk. Okay, we've spent more time on this than I had expected, but I think we had some good discussion here. Let's get started with the exercises this week. At least do the first page, the parsing and warm-up. And read anything you need to in the chapter to get that. How are things going with your job, right?
Good. Should we
Super
finish
busy
up
at
the
moment,
class?
'cause
Or?
we're down to- For about the last month, we've been down to 50% damage. We had two different people that handle our grants and contract, both quit within a week of each other.
You told us that the last time you were here, I think.
And we just finally got approval last week to hire a person to replace one of them. Thankfully, and the reason that one got done quickly, or more quickly than the others, was just because it was an internal part-time employee in another part of the agency. So since she was already employed in the agency and we were offering her a full-time job as opposed to a part-time job, and her background was more appropriate to military and defense than accounting and finance where they had her, we were able to get approval to switch that one. So she starts Monday. So
Good.
that will help. But it's still gonna be a learning curve to get her up to speed on what the new job is.
Okay, you want to stop the recording and we can pray then? Okay.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.